We won't know the Sixers' opponent until probably Thursday night, I think, is when the East play-in games will be resolved. And I would imagine the Sixers, the number one seed in the East, will play either Saturday or Sunday. And, of course, you can hear all the games right here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll take a look at the Sixers, the matchups, the play-in games, this NBA final week, which these play-in games gave it a little bit of push. Can you imagine if there was no play-in tournament, watching the Clippers do what they did the last couple of nights here? Unbelievable. But the play-in tournament gave us some interesting storylines, and I enjoyed it. Like, I don't love this play-in tournament, but at least it did do something for the last. I think they could tweak it and make it a little better. That's all. Mitch Lawrence, longtime NBA writer, SiriusXM NBA radio. He joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as we're here. Mitch, we made it. The NBA playoffs, the play-in game. Are you a fan of the play-in game?
Well, first of all, hey, Mike, thanks for having me on. I don't think the Clippers did anything bad. These teams always do this in the last few games. And by the way, they got themselves a very favorable first-round matchup. They'll take Dallas out, no problem. They've had experience with the Mavericks. And it looks like if the Lakers get to 7, they won't be in the same bracket as the Lakers. So you can complain about what the what the Clippers did. No, I think they did fine.
I agree with what you're saying. Like, they strategically played it right.
Well, that's okay.
They lost to the Thunder and the Rockets. Yeah. I mean, my God.
Well, that's what you have to do. Now, people say, careful what you wish for. I remember years ago, the Nets had given the Knicks all kinds of problems in the regular season, and they couldn't wait. This was when they had Jason Williams and Derek Coleman and Kenny Anderson, and these guys were like, oh yeah, we really want the Knicks, and the Knicks just swept them out. And Chuck Daly, after that, he was coaching them, said, careful what you wish for. Try to tell these guys they went in overconfident. Regular season sometimes doesn't mean a lot. Now, in terms of the play-in, am I supposed to get excited about a Charlotte team that's lost 16 of the last 21, going on the road where they can't win, and playing an Indiana team that's lost 10 of the last 18? Is that supposed to be a good look for the NBA? No, and I know what's going on. It's a COVID season. It's different. They wanted to, maybe give these teams a little bonus after having such a ridiculously hard schedule. But I'll tell you this, on the flip side, Lakers, Golden State, you will never see a better play-in game than that. Why, Mike? Because you're never going to see the best player in the sport.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about years from now. You never see the best player in the sport against the greatest shooter in the history of the sport.
Yeah,
That's not going to happen in a play-in game. So enjoy it while you can, even though it's a late start. But I can't get excited about teams that are sub-500, and that's 5 of the 8 teams. It's only Memphis and the Lakers and the Golden State have got winning records. I can't get excited about these other teams with losing records who are being asked to play extra games. To me, if everybody talks about, the fans of these teams are loving it, it's great for these fans. I'm sure there are a lot of fans in Boston who are like, you know what, we hang banners here. We're not interested in stupid playing games when our team stinks, and we don't deserve to be in it. What we need to do is Danny Ainge needs to figure out a way, whether we need a new coach or new players, we got to get better after such an underachieving, lousy season. I'm sure there are a lot of fans like that. I'm sure there are fans in San Antonio who used to winning championships who are like, why are we even getting involved in this? Let's just, forfeit the game and get better, somehow get more talent. I mean, it just strikes me that there are a lot of markets that would look at this and go, you know what, we're not interested. We don't. And it's not just that. I've talked to players who play in the 80s and 90s, and they say, you know what, if that were us, we would be like, no, that's okay. We're going to decline. We need to go home and get all of our games better and come back next year as a better team.
Well, obviously, yeah, I don't love this play-in whole scenario. I certainly don't like the way they set it up. I mean, you already earned the 7 seed. Now I got to play the 8 just to become the 7. I just earned it by playing,
Well, Mike, what is Doc Rivers doing now? Tom Thibodeau has already figured out a way as the 4 seed how he's going to take Trae Young out of that series. And I'm saying that half jokingly. Doc Rivers finished with the 1 seed, and he doesn't know who he's playing yet. That, both the 1s and the 2s in both conferences, to me, that's a little unfair. The 4, the 5, the 3, the 6, they all know who they're playing. They're getting a jump on preparation. That is not good. That's not a level playing field. So, yeah, the league has to do something about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I said, you're the Sixers or you're the Nets. I mean, you have no idea who you're playing. I mean, and quite frankly,
Right.
if you get stuck playing this Washington team who's playing, they've got some good vibes, and you're getting, a day to prepare for them? I mean, that doesn't seem – now, they don't have to say – they don't have time to prepare for you either on the flip side, but you're right. Tom Thibodeau's sitting there saying, all right, I got a whole week to map out what I want to do in this series.
Now, people will say, there are people out there going to say, well, the Sixers are the number one team or Utah's the number one team with the overall, they should be good enough to figure it out in a day or two. Nah, it doesn't work that way. Everybody wants to be on a level playing field when it comes to this stuff, and that's a problem with the system. And, I tell you what, I'm rooting for Washington. I don't have a dog in the fight. I am totally rooting for Washington. Why? Because I want to see Russell Westbrook go up against Kevin Durant in the first round in the 7-versus-2,
Me too.
which would be so great because, as you know, Westbrook made fun of Durant when he left Oklahoma City, left Russell Westbrook, standing there holding the bag. Of course, James Harden was long gone. Then Durant leaves to go win a title the easy way with Golden State, and Russell Westbrook is talking about cupcakes. And so I want to see those two guys on the court because there is some genuine, let's call it animosity. I could say hate, but it's probably at this point animosity. And I'd love to, and plus Washington, and I know the regular season may not matter a lot, but Washington has been able to score a lot on the Nets. So I still, obviously, the Nets are the better team. But just to have a kind of a showdown like that between two guys who have had their issues in the past, you can't beat that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mitch. I mean, you got Durant, Harden, and Kyrie, Bradley Beal, Westbrook. Now, I mean, they don't have a third guy, but those five guys on the court going at each other for a series would be a lot of fun.
You sure Kyrie's going to be there, or is he going to be off protesting something, worried about something? You never know, right? I mean, look, the whole thing with the Nets is, and it's fascinating. They've only played 8 games together, the three. They already have brought out the lack of continuity card, which the Clippers played last year after their whole thing in the bubble. And I have to remind people, if guys aren't getting hurt or guys aren't falling victim to COVID and they're just taking off games for rest, or in Kyrie's case, he's just leaving because he's gone off the rails because he can't deal with what's going on in the world, that's on them. You can't play the continuity card. You can do it with injuries, yes, serious injuries. You can do it with COVID issues in this day and age, unfortunately. But don't talk to me about a lack of continuity when you're resting people all the time like Kawhi does, and when Kyrie is off and running around doing whatever he's doing and not fulfilling his obligation of playing basketball and being, by the way, played very handsomely to do it.
Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio, and of course, Sixers are the number one seed. Do they have the feel of an NBA title team to you?
Well, Brooklyn's lurking, which everybody knows. Here's the great thing about Philadelphia. They're finally going to hang a banner. They can finally hang a banner that says they're Eastern Conference regular season champs. In this whole deal involving the process, which happened how many years ago, right? Everybody would tell me, oh, teams, you can't have these teams tanking. And I say, the poster child for tanking are the Sixers. They haven't hung one banner yet. Not one. Now they finally won the East. Now they have reason to celebrate. Now, everybody wants them to do a lot more, starting with their owner and starting with, Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers and all the players. But listen, can they win the East? Absolutely. Do I buy that the Nets are invincible? No, Nets have a lot of flaws. I mean, look, first of all, the Nets are coached by a total neophyte when it comes to playoff basketball, Steve Nash. Okay? Doc Rivers has a lot more experience in playoffs. And by the way, he's coming off a choke job, which got him fired out in L.A. Clipperland. Then you have the fact that, the Nets are not a good defensive team. They got better as time went on, but their whole calling card is obviously, we're going to outscore you. But I want to see what happens in close playoff games down at the end of these games, Mike, where they don't have the ability to reference what they did in the regular season. I'm talking about the three guys. Kevin Durant's talking about we have a big 15. No, we're just interested in your big three. That's Durant, Harden, Kyrie, and how they share the ball and who gets the last shots and how all that stuff works. That's what happens when you don't play a lot in the regular season. It'll come back to bite you, I think. Now, can they get away with that in certain games against Washington? Yeah, but if they're in a blood and guts series against Philadelphia for the title, or even Milwaukee, it could be a little dicey there because they just haven't had this experience. And you talk to players from the past and coaches from the past, they're all eager to see if the Nets can actually just kind of throw this thing together without any kind of real big-time experience and all of a sudden in the playoffs turn it on. A lot of people don't think they can.
Mitch Lawrence with us. You know, the Sixers are that 1 seed, so we don't know who they'll play in round number 1. But that Knicks-Hawks 4-5 would be the second-round opponent. Are any of those two teams upset, worthy?
Well, the Knicks have the best defense going. And I'm sure, Tom Thibodeau knows Tom. Doc Rivers knows Tom Thibodeau. Tom was his big assistant in Boston when they won it in 08. And the Knicks, the thing that, and look, I would pick Philly over New York, no doubt about it. But it would be a tougher series for them, for Philadelphia, in that the Knicks do play very good defense. And they're one of these teams that don't beat themselves. They play hard all the time. Julius Randle has had a breakout year. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Julius Randle's as good as Embiid or Simmons. The Sixers are still going to come out with the best players on the court. But the thing about the Knicks is, and here's the other problem for the Knicks, especially against Philadelphia. As much failure as Embiid and Simmons have had, they've been in big-time playoff wars. Lost about this, a tough series against Toronto and Kawhi on that shot that bounced in, 3 or 4 or 5 times. But that is the type of scar that you learn from, and you're gonna benefit from that probably somewhere down the road. Julius Randle, R.J. Barrett have never played in a playoff game. You know what that means? That means you're going to try to learn on the fly. The only guy you can look at and say, well, he's been in the playoffs is Derrick Rose. And, Derrick Rose against the Sixers, I mean, he's, if the Knicks get out of the first round against Atlanta, a lot of people are picking him because, hey, they swept him. It's a favorable matchup. But you're going up against a Sixer team that is battle-tested in the playoffs, while the Knicks have maybe coming off one series, but still without guys with a lot of experience. And, hey, you have to say, no, the Sixers would still be the team, the heavy favorite, to get out of that. But will the Knicks be a pain in the neck for them? You bet they will because of the way they play.
Yeah, that defense would be an interesting series, those two defensive teams. How about the break Philly kind of took when the Heat ended up getting a 6? Are you not worried about the Heat or the fact that Milwaukee and Miami got to play in round number 1? How big of a path break did the Sixers get there?
I'll tell you what, the Bucks were the big losers. The Bucks last week, I believe it was a week ago today, went into San Antonio. Now remember, all they have to do at that time is tie the Nets, and they have the tiebreaker head-to-head. So they finish at 2. They go in, and they give up 87 points in the first half to the Spurs, who finished, 6 games or 5 or 6 games under 500. And they lost that game. They also lost the game at Houston back in late April when Giannis went down, but that was with an injury. Here they just go in, and they just absolutely get smoked by the Spurs team. That cost them the 2 seed. And now at 3, they've got to play Miami. And Miami, what did they do against Miami in the bubble last year? Total meltdown, collapse, whatever you call it. And this is why Mike Budenholzer goes into these playoffs as the coach, the number 1 coach with the target, the bullseye on his back. Terry Stotts in Portland's under some pressure, obviously. But no, it starts with Mike Budenholzer because after going to the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of years ago and losing to Toronto, last year took a huge step backward, failed to get out of the second round, won only 1 game. Yes, Giannis was compromised with a knee, but also they looked awful because they couldn't figure out Miami's defense. And now they're going against the same Miami team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals. I know it was in a bubble, but they're going against the same team, Milwaukee, and they've got to figure out Jimmy Butler and all these guys who drove them up the wall last year with Eric Spoelstra. That is a terrible draw for the Bucks.
Yeah, that one is really because one of those two teams is going to be out, and obviously you're either going to lose last year's Eastern Conference champions or the Bucks again in a conference, Mitch, that most people thought all year long was a 3-team conference: Philly, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee, and one of those teams could be gone.
Yeah, and I still think it's top heavy. I mean, look, 7 or 8. Is probably going to have a sub-500 record. I mean, the Celtics, if they win, they'll be a 1 game above. For years and years, we've heard about, this is all cyclical. Don't worry, there'll be a time when the worst teams in the East, the 7th and the 8th seeds, they'll have winning records. That still's not happening. The East is still, you got 3 teams out West in that play-in. Those 3 teams, starting with the Lakers, who all have winning records and pretty good records at that. And we know it's fluky. It's all about LeBron being out for a lot, 22 or 26 games and missing Davis at points. And, obviously Golden State, it's been Steph Curry by himself because he doesn't have Klay Thompson. and everybody's pushing him for the MVP, it's got to be Jokic. He's played every game, Mike, and he's just had a phenomenal year. And if Chris Paul doesn't finish second, as I tweeted, this has to be a congressional investigation because of what he's done for the Phoenix Suns and the impact he has made, not with scoring, but with leadership and basically showing Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton the ropes. Here's the problem for Phoenix. They're looking at a first-round series. I would expect the Lakers to win this game on Wednesday night against Golden State, and all of a sudden Phoenix is looking there going, we get LeBron and Anthony Davis in the first round, even though we have home court, and we have no experience compared to those guys. And that massive front with Andre Drummond and Anthony Davis, all we've got is DeAndre Ayton, and after that, it's guys like Frank Kaminsky and Saric. You know what kind of blood's going to be on the court in Phoenix? It ain't going to be LeBron.
No, and that Western Conference is going to be, because if Golden State gets the 1 or the 2, or the Lakers are the 7 or the 8, or I mean the 7, either one of those two teams, you're the 1 or the 2, and thinking, man, we're the 1 or the 2. We got to play Steph Curry and LeBron James. I mean, that is not an enviable thing, and you can make a good argument that the lower seed. I mean, the Clippers are in that 4 or 5 game, but Portland could beat Denver too.
Well, without Jamal Murray. You know, Jokic did a great job. This is the other reason Jokic has to be the MVP. Jamal Murray goes down, and the first 10 games without him, they were 9-1. That's when usually a team could collapse a little bit, and they actually improved over the long haul. I know it's been a little rough. I think they're 4-4 in their last 8 without him, and they'll catch up with them. They're not going to go deep without Murray. But even so, regular season-wise, we're talking about regular season voting for Jokic. When a guy who's an MVP candidate not only plays every game, that shouldn't be a special thing, but in this day and age, it is, especially with the compressed schedule. But when he can get his team from a 4 seed to a 3 seed with the 5th best record overall, that should lock up the MVP. Now, the problem for Denver is, you know what? They don't have Murray, and that's going to catch up with them. Catch up with them in this round. You know, Portland's an awful, historically bad defensive team, but they've won 10 out of 12, and they've got lured, and they've got some scores. Who knows? Maybe they'll win a couple of shootouts and beat Denver. So it's a bad year for Denver. It looked like to be, you know, coming off that bubble where they went to the Western Conference Finals. You'd say, hey, this year was going to be maybe their year, not to break through, but maybe get back to the Western Finals and try to get the Lakers again. But I don't think they're going anywhere without Jamal Murray.
All right, Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. Mitch, how many teams are legitimate title contenders? How many you got?
I'd say in the East, Sixers, Brooklyn. I don't count the Bucks. I have a lot of problems with the Bucks. I just don't know if their big three is big enough to handle the Nets, to handle Philly. And in the West, I still just go with the Lakers. I don't have a lot of faith. My problem is, and everything obviously, Mike, is based on LeBron's health.
Yeah, no doubt.
He will have the most screw. You know, he had to leave the game last night because of the ankle, and it could be a little gimpy here. And if he's gimpy and if he's compromised, that knocks them down a level, and all of a sudden it's a scramble out west. But look, Kawhi Leonard, he's not the same player who he was in Toronto. He wasn't the same player he was in parts of last year. So if Kawhi Leonard is diminished at all, Clippers aren't going anywhere. And I like the move they made for Rajon Rondo. As a matter of fact, the Hawks are going to miss Rajon Rondo in this series. I'm sure Tom Thibodeau loves the fact that he won't have to see him on the court in New York or in Atlanta. But out west, it's very hard. You know, I'm not a big guy on Utah. Mike Conley hasn't played since April 16th. Right? So that's like he's going to start the playoffs basically having not played for it's not Mike Conley. Donovan Mitchell. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I misspoke. Donovan Mitchell, their best player. Now, to their credit, they won the West. That's great. But they have tailed off here without Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you haven't played in 5 or 6 weeks and you're starting up the playoffs, you mean to tell me, you're not hitting the ground running. So that's a problem. And so, you know, there aren't a lot of teams that jump out. Maybe it'll be a surprise team. It's not going to be the Mavericks. I think the Clippers are smart to get them. And the Clippers are in a good spot. And you know what? I think they can get, you know, the thing with the Clippers is they have never been to a conference finals in all their history, which is like the number one longest drought, like all the major sports of a franchise not getting to a conference finals. I think the Clippers have that distinction. It's time they made it, don't you think?
Should be fun. It all starts tomorrow night with the play-ins, and the East is Tuesday, the West is Wednesday, and then, of course, the playoffs begin this weekend. You'll hear them all right here on 97.3 ESPN. With the Sixers, we'll find out who they'll play. Follow Mitch_Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Mitch, good to talk, pal.
Mike, thanks for having me. Enjoy it, and let's see if the Sixers can make a deep run here.
Let's see. All right, there he goes, Mitch Lawrence. He has them listed as one of the only 3 teams he has winning the title. He has Sixers, Nets, and Lakers. That's it. As guys he thinks can win it all.